Hello everyone, my name is Zach Cross. Now if I mention the word creatine, a lot of you are likely to start conjuring up images of meatheads in the gym, taking a bunch of supplements, trying to lift as much weight and get as big as possible, but what if I told you that creatine is actually a naturally occurring organic compound found and created within our own bodies? Without this organic compound, our bodies almost completely fail to develop both cognitively and physically. So what I'm really here to tell you about is a little known disease called guanidinoacetate acetate methyltransferase deficiency, otherwise known as GAMT deficiency or GAMT-D for short. I'm going to tell you what little we do know about it, how we're going to test for it or how we can test for it, and what few things we can do to treat it. Now, GAMT-D as I said, is a very rare disease affecting roughly 1 in 2,640,000 people. Although this number is a little hard to say is completely accurate, as it is such a new disease, and many doctors are finding that they have misdiagnosed patients in the past that were presenting very similar symptoms and were led to believe that it was a different disease entirely. Now, it was first explained just in 1994 by Dr. Stockler and his team. And in very simple terms, GAMT-D is essentially a deficiency or a genetic disorder where our genome fails to code for the genome that creates creatine. And without creatine production, the body's musculoskeletal system doesn't develop properly. We see deficiencies in growth, in the development of the muscular system, etc. Possibly even more important are delays or the inability for sociocognitive development. So we see things such as speech issues, seizures, and even mental retardation. Now, we've talked about what it is, so let me tell you about how we test for it. So there's not many ways to test for it, and the main way that we first get an indication is actually through testing for urine. When we test the urine, we are checking to see if there's excess creatine waste, all right? If there's high levels of creatine in the urine, that's showing us that the body is not actually producing and maintaining creatine as it should to use properly. Now, if we have that first indicator, at that point, the doctors are going to go into more specific genetic testing. They're going to test specifically the genome and look at the actual structure of the genome and make sure that it is coding properly. And then lastly, we also have MRIs. And an MRI of the brain can also show us whether or not we have proper levels of creatine, or in the case of GAMT deficiency, if we have severely low levels of creatine in the brain. Lastly, I'm going to tell you about how we treat it. And in a case presented by Dr. Arunashel and his team, a simple oral creatine supplement was shown to be vastly effective. So with an oral creatine supplement, they saw very rapid improvements in socio-cognitive abilities, as well as elevated levels of creatine in the brain, right? Getting the brain closer to that normal creatine level. Now, to conclude, GAMT-D is again a very rare disease and relatively new disorder, all about the lack of creatine production in the body and how detrimental that can actually be. We also talked about the few ways to test for it, such as testing the urine for the excess creatine waste, testing the specific genome, the portion of the genome that tells us to create the creatine and use it, and how oral supplementation can be used for a lot more than just lifting heavy weights and getting big in the gym. Thank you very much for listening.